Hi, my name is Brandon Andrews. I am the San Juan County Parks and Fair Director. And the San Juan County Parks and Fair Department is the one that was tasked with by County Council to oversee the Cultural Access Program. And I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Conway. I go by Gabe. I'm the Projects and Grant Coordinator here at Parks and Fair, and I am assisting Brandon in this new exciting adventure for the county. And thank you for joining us.
Okay, what Gabe and I had kind of thought is that we would kind of walk through the website and materials with folks and then save lots of time for questions at the end, if that's possible. So as we're going, kind of if you would like, or it would be helpful, feel free to take a note about something along the way, and we'll keep all those documents up, and so we'll be able to go back and re-reference it and along the way. So I'll be doing a lot of screen sharing during this time. So does that sound okay to folks? General thumbs up if that works. Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's get to. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I figure I'm going to start this the same way I figure other people will. You're going to Google it, right? So we have the San Juan County Cultural Access Program. And it's not this first link, and hopefully this first link will disappear because as I was getting ready, I went ahead and started going through this. And this is a page that I have just archived, so hopefully this will drop out of the Google search results. But it's the second one, Cultural Access San Juans, which will bring you to the program homepage. And so, whoops, sorry. Here we go. The program homepage, Cultural Access San Juans, and on the top right, you will see the contact information for Gabe and myself and some key dates. So applications actually opened up this past Monday, but I don't know who's turning in grant applications on the first day available. So, but that is when the window opened, and then today, and like I said, Tuesday and Wednesday are those next application support meetings. And at the close of business on February 16th is when the application period closes. And then this spring, we will have those grant awards announced and contracts signed. So for those who are a little less familiar, what is the Cultural Access Program? Well, a little over a year ago, here in San Juan County, the council passed a 0.1% sales tax that is designed to provide stable, long-term support for local arts, science, heritage, and cultural organizations. That tax took place in Q2 of last year, so April 1st. So this first round does not have a full year's worth of generated revenue as part of it, and which is one of the reasons why we're going to be kind of running two grant programs over the long term, that only one of them is available in the first year because we just don't have a full year's worth of available funds to run both of them. So what are those goals? And a lot of the goals and criteria that we're going to be walking through today are set by the state and the legislation that made this kind of program possible, and generally a little less by the county specifically. So in the state RCW legislation around this program is that the funds first go towards local schools. And what that means, and the state actually set a lower threshold of percentage of funds that need to go to the states, but the county council, wanting to support local school districts, actually bumped up the commitment of funds to school districts. And what happens is this isn't a solid dollar amount that goes to the school to be used for general operations. This is for getting these science, cultural, arts organizations in the classroom, or taking classrooms to those places. Whether that could be out to the Limekiln Lighthouse for a tour out there about history and geology. It could be about bringing biologists into the classroom to do in-class learning that way. And then what happens is, the school pays that organization, that nonprofit, for the work that they did, and then we reimburse the school. So even though the dollars are going to the schools, they actually end up at the nonprofits. But it helps offset the cost that schools have been bearing on their own budget during this time. And so that's the first 20% goes to schools. And then in addition to that, 8% of the funds goes to school for transportation costs. And for schools, this can pay for the buses and the gas, and the drivers. It can pay for substitute teachers, ferry costs, all of those things that we know make it difficult to be able to either get someone here or get students to those learning experiences, particularly if they're on other islands. And then the remaining 62% of funds will be distributed through a grant program. And it'll be two things. The first one is called Comprehensive Organizational Support, and this is the one that will launch in 2027. And this is for organizations that are doing regular year-round programming as part of what their organization does. The program we're launching this year are what we're calling impact grants, which are for generally newer organizations, smaller organizations, one-off events or small series of events. Think a small summer music festival or something like that, a pilot project, and they're smaller in overall grant size and require a match, but that can be volunteer time, which is valued at, I think, nearly $50 an hour. It's one of those things where I really, as someone who has been part of nonprofits and a volunteer for many of them or on the board, wanted to make sure that that match was not going to be a real barrier to access. And so we'll walk through that. Hopefully that should be good. And down here, you'll find frequently asked questions on this homepage. Where does the money come from? How can it be used? How do you apply for a grant? What are the benefits? And what other counties have these types of programs, if you're just curious, because we are not the first, and we are standing on the administrative shoulders of others who have gone before us and have been kind enough to let us modify their materials in a way that we think will work well for this program in San Juan County. So other than this homepage, we're really looking at two things, which are found in these buttons here: funding opportunities and additional resources. You'll also find it here on the left-hand side. So funding opportunities is where we're going to kind of go next. And so again, for this first year, all applicants will follow the impact funding pathway, even if in 2027 they would qualify for the comprehensive grant. And so how to apply is making sure that you meet eligibility, which is mission alignment, and that your organization's primary purpose, meaning your stated mission and majority of your activities, must be to advance arts, culture, heritage, or science. You must be a nonprofit in Washington State. Your location must be in San Juan County, or you can be outside of San Juan County, but the majority of your services are provided within San Juan County. And program delivery, you provide at least one cultural event or program each year for the general public or youth. Lastly is you'll see the application guidelines and materials, and send that back. So for folks who, particularly in 2027, when both programs are running, comprehensive and impact, what's the difference? Comprehensive funding runs on a 2-year contract up to $45,000 per year. Impact funding, which is this year, is a 1-year contract up to $25,000. And so both, comprehensive is open to nonprofits, but you have to have a 2-year history of public programming year round, no match required. And this year, again, registered nonprofit, you must offer at least one program each year, and a 50% match required with volunteer labor funds, materials, etc. And at the bottom, if you just think that today is too much fun and you would like to do this with us again, you will find the links for the workshops on Tuesday and Wednesday here. But most of what you're going to be doing is right here in these forms, and that's kind of what we're going to walk through next. So let's go ahead and open up the impact funding guidelines. Okay, so impact funding. The application deadline is 5 p.m. on Monday, February 2026. This kind of restates what the program is, that it's meant to support those nonprofits in those particular fields, that this impact funding is not comprehensive funding, it's for 1 year, etc. The funding cycle begins July 1st, 2026, and ends June 30th. The reason that this was decided is the portion that goes to support schools, so that they can be, that's kind of the fiscal calendar that they're working on, and makes that a lot easier for them. We found that nonprofits tend to be much more flexible in that they're like, oh, money? Yes, we can make that work roughly anytime. But schools and the districts need generally further out planning for their annual budgets. And the website. So again, these important dates. We released these last month. Applications open. We're doing the workshops closed the 16th. Notification of funding decision approximately May 1st or so. And then throughout May and June, be getting those contracts put together and signed with those awarded organizations. And then that 1-year funding period runs July 1 through June 30 of the following year. Lovely table of contents. Also, huge kudos to Gabriel for putting these materials together in their final form. Really appreciate her administrative, dot the I's, cross the T's. Gabriel and I are the staff associated with this program. And the primary funding goals, all applicants, it's about supporting those programs and nonprofits in arts and culture. It's to increase access to these programs and reduce barriers to participation, and support programming by and for or ethnically specific communities or underrepresented groups, expand access to youth education and sustainability and collaboration among cultural sector organizations. So one of the things where I said that a lot of our terms are defined by the state is true. This particular next section is categories, and where we have actually narrowed things down a little bit more so we can kind of get a handle on things. When we spoke with other organizations, they said, particularly amongst like heritage and cultural organizations, like what does that mean and who does that qualify for? And so we worked to put together some handles on that feel still very broad and not trying to eliminate anyone from funding, but making sure that it's kind of meeting the intent of what the legislature has put together. So these arts organizations could be from the following artistic fields: design, folk and traditional arts, creative placemaking, dance, literary arts, multidisciplinary arts, music, media theater, media arts theater, visual arts. Cultural organization means an organization that provides public programming focused on a particular group that shares a common and immutable personal identity trait and that seeks to advance or preserve the traditions, language, knowledge, skills, cuisine, or achievements of that group. Heritage organization focused on identification, documentation, exhibition, interpretation, and preservation of the past, including people, places, events, and physical spaces of any community of people. And science. The following fields of physical science, life science, natural science, earth and space sciences, engineering, technology, and work that applies to scientific methods or engineering design cycles. So when we think about, I don't know everyone's organization or who they might be interested in working with. Hopefully your organization fits in what I've just described. If not, it doesn't mean you can't receive funds, but as an organization, but we'll get to that when we talk about fiscal sponsorship. Impact funding, minimum of $2,500, maximum of $2,500. Match requirement, again, is 50%, but that can come from labor, the time, and because I know, like, if nothing else, nonprofits run on volunteers, and those hours add up quickly, and they are the beating heart of what makes things happen. But it can also can be a projected income from other grants. You can use fundraising and earned income in other areas from ticketing or tuition fees. And this eligibility is what we talked about before. You have to have a primary purpose in your mission statement, that nonprofit status and location. You have to do these programs. What is important is about exclusions from eligibility. They include any agency of the state or any of its political subdivisions, any radio or television broadcast network or station, cable communication system, internet-based communications venture or service, newspaper or magazine. As I read that, you might be able to tell that sounds like very much legislature language, and that is a copy and paste. So governments cannot receive these funds. So the town of Friday Harbor cannot apply to do a cultural heritage event. San Juan County, our department that administers this fund does the county fair. We can't use these funds to support the county fair in any way. So that is who is excluded. So what can you use the funds for or not for? And so it's, need to be directly related to producing public programs. And that's what the name of the game. What is it doing to help make programs more frequent, more accessible out there? So you can use it for staffing costs, capital improvements, technology, equipment. It's pretty broad, honestly, if you can talk about how, like, one of the things that I appreciate about what the legislature allows of these funds is it can help cover boring costs like staff cost or your telephone bill or your insurance cost as an organization. because so many grants want to pay for the stuff, but not how stuff gets done. And so it's one of the things I really appreciate about this. And so as long as it's in support of those presentations and festivals and programs and scholarships and internships and accommodation, added services is really, really great. So what can it not support? It can't support programming outside of San Juan County. It can't be work that is commercial in nature. It can't be used to produce fundraisers or galas, even if it's for that type of organization, because it's about programs, not further fundraising, not further capacity building. Debt service or endowment building, events of a particular political or religious practice. It can't be for programs exclusively for students outside of San Juan Public Schools or exclusively at any of those organizations outside of San Juan County. So can't use as a payment to a member of the advisory board or a San Juan County employee. I cannot take your money. Radio or television networks operations, and again, the rest of that kind of excluded who cannot receive funds there. Application support, what we're doing today, those workshops, we're happy to work with folks one-on-one. The sooner the better, because as we get closer to February 16th, we might see more of those. And then the way that this program works is that this will be produced as a contract for services. So the county, via this program, wants to see more cultural activity and programs happening. And so to do that, there's this tax collected, and we are contracting with nonprofits to get that work done, is essentially what this section means. And you're going to sign, we're going to come up with a scope of work about what that means. That'll be part of your application. What are you proposing to be doing with this work? It's going to be invoiced, etc. So that's roughly what this means. And to receive payment, some reporting, quarterly reporting that should be pretty easy. Gabriel and I work a lot with grants. We know that there is nothing better than a grant that is relatively easy to apply for and to report on, because those things can be incredibly time consuming. So what are the requirements for funded organizations? The big ones, you got to have insurance, and we require this across the board. So it should be general liability insurance of $1 million. If you're working with, if the program is exclusively for youth, seniors, or people with disabilities, you will need abuse and molestation insurance if it is exclusively, but it's for the general public, that is not needed. But if you're doing a class for youth or for seniors or for people with disabilities exclusively, that kind of insurance will be required for that type of programming if it is not for the general public. If those same groups of people are operating automobiles as part, if they're using own rented or leased automobiles to transport you, if the organization is using own rented or leased automobiles to transport those folks. So if they're not meeting you at a location and you are picking them up in a van or a vehicle, gonna make sure you have commercial auto insurance. If you're on a boat, you're gonna need some marine insurance. If you have W-2 employees, need to have compensation insurance, which is, a lot of these things I feel like already exist if you're doing this type of work. So hopefully this isn't too much of a barrier, but it's one of those things where you always have to say it out there. You must be legally compliant organization and have a business license. And when you produce the programming that these funds are supporting, the Cultural Access San Juan's program must be acknowledged in all public announcements, programs, advertising, and we will be putting together a communications guideline and toolkit. I mean, it's going to be some basic logos. I don't think too much is really being sought after in that particular area. So now we're going to talk a little bit, and this particular section is going to start speaking more towards a portion of your application, but what you'll actually be putting together. And so if the funds are meant to make programming more prolific and more accessible, part of your application is going to speak to some of these areas. And so equity and access has lots of application. I think it's oftentimes wrapped up in this in the idea of DEI, but it means so much more, such as acceptance-based is about welcoming and belonging, and I think kind of fits in that umbrella that I think most people are familiar with, but also communications access. Um, are your materials red, green, colorblind? Like there are things that are just really functional. Does your website work with a screen reader for someone who is blind? Kind of those elements. Same thing with disability access. Are you able to provide some planning to accommodate those with mobility challenges? It really make sure that everyone in the community can show up. Financial access. Can you provide free or reduced cost access? Geographic access. And so internet best access, public access. I'll let you guys read through that kind of stuff. But those are some of the things about how can we make sure more people end up at programming and no one in San Juan County feels excluded to those aims. And then this youth education is really about organizations that are working with the schools. And so if that's for you, that'll be here. It needs to be curriculum-based programming. It's not, it's about learning, not, hopefully we have fun while we're learning, but it's not supposed to be fun without learning, kind of along the way. And then the application. Your application can be submitted via email to culturalaccess@sanjuancountywa.gov. And the deadline again is that Monday, February 16th. And what are your components? And so one of the things that we tried to kind of make similar is that when we get to this application components, I'll download it and show it to you here in a moment. But this is basically the application from this point on. We've separated it out so you don't have everything above it. But your organizational background. What is your mission statement? What is your organization? We try to keep these responses pretty short, 50 words, as little as 100 words here. What's your proposal sentence? Like, what are you really trying to do with these dollars? For contract deliverables, what are 2 to 4 key programs or deliverables for each quarter? And that may not be applicable. If you're looking towards one event, some sort of youth summit, that's fine. We only need it for that one quarter. And that's going to be totally good. But maybe you could be talking in quarter 1 is about planning. Quarter 2 is about, the ramp up and execution. And quarter 3 is follow up and, after action reviews and how you're going to do it around. So it's really kind of as flexible as your programming needs to be. And so there are some examples here: completion of a 2 full day, week-long summer education camp, host workshops, lectures, serving, X amount of community members, etc. So this is going to be what's kind of developed as your scope of work for your contract. And so, as we review these, if there are any questions or notes, we'll be reaching out to those who are going to be awarded funds to make those deliverables a little bit more concrete and clear. What are you going to do for general public programs? And can you talk about your details of the programming or events? Write about how this work benefits the people and communities of San Juan County. And so, you've got all 3 of these questions for a total of a minimum of 300 words. So, it's not meant to be 300 to 500 words per question. That would be a long evening, and you're going to need a nice warm cup of tea, and we don't want you to have to do that. So, these amount of words is really kind of, elaborating here. Same couple more questions here. What's your proposal budget? And we've got a little worksheet for that to make that a little bit easier, and talking about that 50% being a match, projected expenses, whether that's staff, contractors, facility rentals, if you're going to be doing it in another space, promotion, marketing, insurance, permits, all those things. Like, I really appreciate how flexible these funds are to make sure that it can reach all areas of expense for these organizations. And you'll be able to talk to about projected income. Okay, volunteer time for your board or advisor. Volunteers' hours may be calculated at $40.28 per hour. That is a national third party that does that kind of analysis of the value of volunteer work, and that is the number for this next year. And so it'll talk about how to project income. So, we're tickets, 50 of them at $15, instead of maybe putting that to a lump sum is kind of appreciated. And so how are applications going to be reviewed? So as part of this process, the San Juan County Council set up a cultural access review board. There will be 5 people on that board. It's 1 from Lopez and Shaw, 1 from San Juan, 1 from Orcas, and then 2 at-large members selected for that. And they will be reviewing these and scoring the answers above, I believe, 1 through 5. It's been a while since I've looked at our proposed materials for that, but they're the ones that put that together and make those recommendations to County Council. Of course, any spending within San Juan County is at the discretion and approval of the San Juan County Council. So, but I would say that, whether it's the lodging tax funds, the public facilities fund assistance program, in this, like, I've never really seen County Council mess with the recommendations. So I would say that while they have the discretion to change those things, I would call it highly unusual if that were to occur. So whatever this Cultural Access Review Board really brings forward is likely to be funded as proposed. And so this is, again, part of a little bit drilling down into those questions. And then we're doing these application supports right now. Okay, what does reporting look like in payment phases? Reporting is done quarterly to get your contract set up. If you're an awarded organization, we're going to need to have a signed contract, a W-9 for your organization, a copy of your business license, and proof of insurance. And so really, this is kind of a little snippet, but you'll see the actual form. But it's pretty simple. What was the date? What was the name? Did you collaborate with any other funded organizations? Where did it happen? Was this for the general public or youth education? How many people were there? Was it free? Like, hopefully that's pretty reasonable information to be reporting. And then a couple questions like describe your work over the last quarter. And if you've got any supporting materials, photos, videos, other documents that we could use to kind of put together an annual report and talk about the what was achieved in this program, across the county from all of these awarded organizations is super helpful. And then your invoice will be, pretty simple. Name and contact. What did you do from the contract deliverables? What are you requesting for that payment, etc. So this is the impact guidelines. And so when we come to the application form, again, it's going to look incredibly similar to what we just saw. Organizational background. Again, it's that 50 words. Tell us about your organization, who your primary participants, audience, 100 words. That 50-word proposal sentence, contract deliverables like we talked about, program proposals, speaking to capacity and feasibility, planning and promotion, that budget we were talking about, and that's pretty much it. So hopefully this feels, because I know that this guidelines document, the longer I talked, the more it's like, wow, this thing is really long and big, and I hope this isn't too intimidating as we walk through it for the first time, because the application itself is much shorter to walk through these things. So that is the application there, and the budget form. So this is, you've got a blank one in this first tab here, but you also have an example here. So, program staff is projected to be 30,000, clowns to go 4,000, supplies, and all these things kind of add up. Expenses to be covered, what you expect to be covered by donations. Here, who the Grange is donating their space. So you have in-kind, expenses here. And then what is your projected income? The organization's own cash, annual fundraiser that, this year, this total must be at least twice your requested grant amount for a 1-to-1 match. So hopefully that ends up working pretty well. I believe all the formulas should be working. If not, I will attempt to get that corrected and re-uploaded to the website. So that is our budget form. And then one of the things we talked about was, what if you aren't a nonprofit and you want to do something? Yes, you can. You still can't be a government entity or one of those magazines, etc. But if you are an individual or there's a group of you, for instance, there on Lopez, there is a Friends of the Lopez Island canoe landings, canoe journeys, and they are not a registered nonprofit, but they have been fundraising for years to support canoe landings and canoe journeys to and landing on Lopez Island. And so they can work with an eligible organization I'll use an example of the Lopez Historical Museum to be their fiscal sponsor. Now, I think there's a lot of goodwill that needs to come from a fiscal sponsor because they are ultimately responsible for the contract, making sure that insurance is taken care of, and the rest of that. So I don't expect that we'll see a lot of these because I think they're generally nonprofits that meet the definitions which we've talked about, that will be able to carry out most of these services. But this is one way for fiscal sponsors to be able to come in and help support programming that can be done if a nonprofit is not currently planning on doing that. So a little bit here. And okay, I think that's the website. I think that's the documents. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. I will turn it over for questions and I'll reshare my screen if we want to re-reference any of the documents and go from there. So do we have any questions? And thank you for your patience in listening to me talk for so long. And if there's no questions, that's totally fine.
And again, after watching this and you go through your application process, if you come up with any questions, feel free to reach out to us or perhaps join one of the other webinars and have your questions answered then.
Yeah, it's a lot of initial reading up front, but I hope it feels pretty straightforward, all things considered. If anyone's got any questions. So if you have no questions, I just want to thank you for showing up today and taking an interest in this program, and really excited about what our community is going to be able to do with these funds. And Gabriel and I have been talking a lot, and I think we are just this is a program that's really excited to come to work for, to see what our friends and neighbors put together for our community. And I think it's going to be incredible, and probably really just go beyond what I can even imagine. So really excited to see what comes up. So if that's it, feel free to leave the meeting at your leisure, and we will see you out there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say thank you, and I was trying to find my mute button at the bottom. Have a great Saturday, everybody.
Yes, happy Saturday. Bye.